Okay, and thank you everyone for coming. This is the ICSB and the International Council for Small Business webinar series. This is our inaugural webinar series, and the plan for the ICSB webinar series is to hold once a month an online discussion, basically to talk about issues affecting small businesses, medium businesses, and entrepreneurs worldwide. And it's a forum for ICSB members that include many of our affiliates, including ICSB, and to come and join us for an hour every month to discuss the latest issues, trends, challenges, and opportunities facing this field. And we're very excited today to have for our inaugural webinar series Dr. Heidi Neck. She is the president of our U.S. affiliate, ICSB. And Heidi Neck is also a professor at Babson College, and she's also a Timmons professor of entrepreneurship studies. She teaches entrepreneurship at the MBA and executive level. Her research interests include entrepreneurship education, entrepreneurship inside organizations, and creative thinking. I must stress creative thinking because she's really compelling an excellent argument about the future of entrepreneurship education. She also is an author of a book, a lead author of a book called Teaching Entrepreneurship, a Practice-Based Approach. Heidi, welcome to the ICSB webinar series, and thank you very much for kicking off our inaugural series here. We're super excited to have you here.
Thank you, Ayman. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank ICSB for hosting this webinar series, and I want to give a shout out to all of my friends out there from ICSB and all the other affiliates around the world. Thank you for spending a little time with me and hanging out with me for this hour. My passion, my love, what excites me, what wakes me up in the morning is around entrepreneurship education, because I really believe that it's one of the most powerful economic forces we have in the world. And from an education perspective, it can really change mindsets where students can think about creating the future rather than just reacting to it. I think entrepreneurship education facilitates startups that generate wealth and jobs for many and not just a few. And I also think through entrepreneurship education, our students begin to develop a bias for action in all contexts, not just startups. And I think entrepreneurship education helps us create a realization, if not a deep appreciation, that entrepreneurship is not just reserved for the startup world anymore, that entrepreneurship education, because of what it does for our students, is needed throughout the world. And that's why I want to kind of talk about ICSB just for a little bit and give, I mean, I know all ICSB members are ICSB members, but I also want to show the affiliates around the world and all the ICSB members what ICSB is doing and the changes that we're making. Because our future, I think, as a globe, it depends not only on educating future founders, but also educating students to act and think entrepreneurially in all types of ambiguous environments. And really, when we think about it, our students in our entrepreneurship courses today must think and act like owners regardless of what they do. And that has led me as president of ICSB to move the organization forward, and last year we instituted a mission change. So our previous mission was somewhat ambiguous, and I think we were trying to do a lot of things for a lot of different stakeholders in the entrepreneurship field. But because of what's going on in the world today, and I really do think entrepreneurship education is needed now more than ever, that we don't have this singular location to go to and this community around entrepreneurship education that we really need. So our new mission around ICSB, it's been accepted by the membership, and we introduced this at the conference in January, is that ICSB is now an inclusive community advancing specifically entrepreneurship education. We have a renewed and refined focus on entrepreneurship education through bold teaching, scholarship, and practice. You know, today it's hard to find a school throughout the U.S. and around the globe that doesn't have an established entrepreneurship education program, or at least trying to build one. And as a result of that, the demand and community for learning and networking around entrepreneurship education has never been greater. So what we're doing is we're refining our mission to focus on the core needs of our members, while also leveraging what USASB has really done best over the past 35 years. And we have been that place that people want to go to communicate, network, and learn about entrepreneurship education. So now our community is going to be comprised of educators who like to share best practices but also challenge the existing paradigms of how entrepreneurship should be taught, to whom and to what ends. It's also a community for scholars of entrepreneurship education who are really developing those robust and theoretical and conceptual foundations that move the practice of entrepreneurship education forward. And it's also a place where scholars come to translate their traditional academic research into teachable content. And finally, our community is comprised of both the program directors and the practitioners of all types that are complementing and supplementing what we're doing in the classroom, and all those practical immersions outside of the classroom in the broader entrepreneurship community. So in general, we're trying to connect members, encourage collaboration, and drive innovation all in this sphere of entrepreneurship education. And I'd like to show you all a short video of what USASB is standing for today. Michael, do you mind showing that video?
Entrepreneurship education isn't just reserved for the startup world. Entrepreneurship education is needed throughout the world. USASB encourages all of our entrepreneurship students to act entrepreneurially in any type of ambiguous environment. Our students need to think and act like owners regardless of what they do.
At USASB, by our focus on entrepreneurship education, we're able to weave in the best of teaching, the best of research, and the best of administration to sort of push this whole concept of entrepreneurship education forward.
Applied learning is the future of USASB.
A teacher needs to be passionate. A teacher needs to be skilled in motivating students. Entrepreneurship education is multidisciplinary and can be taught and should be taught in connection with the technical knowledge that students are learning in their chosen fields.
In today's world, how we teach is just as important as what we teach. USASB and its mission is all about advancing entrepreneurship education, bringing students to the next level, making it more applied, more real, more relevant than ever before.
So that just gives you an indication of where USASB is going. And as president of the USASB, it's given me a lot of, not time, but it's forced me to really think about what are the challenges facing us as a field of entrepreneurship education. And that's really what I'd like to talk about the rest of this webinar, at least a very short period of time before we turn it over to Q&A. And it's not that I have a lot of answers, but I'm really just posing the challenges out there. Michael, can you hand me back over the PowerPoint presentation, please?
Yes.
So I've been inspired recently by an awesome book by Stephen Coltai called Peace Through Entrepreneurship. And he talks about that joblessness is the root cause of global unrest threatening international security. And he argues that fostering entrepreneurship is the remedy. I mean, when you really think about some of the things happening to us around the world, especially around youth employment rates are rising around the world, all around the world, not just in some regions of the world. You know, some are arguing that automation is destroying the workforce for many. And if you think about it, what happens when, like I have a student right now who is driving for Uber because he's trying to work on his startup at the same time, and Uber is giving him some cash to survive. But what happens to my student that drives for Uber, and then Uber all of a sudden goes to all these autonomous and driverless causes? My former doctoral advisor, I did my PhD at the University of Colorado, and Dale Meyer, who was the former president of USASB and heavily involved in ICSB as well, he sent me an email the other day And I was thinking about stealing his words, but rather than stealing his words, I'm just going to share with you this paragraph that he put in my email. He goes, Heidi, there exists an interesting ongoing debate regarding the future of work and jobs, ranging from more jobs for all to the loss of 40% of middle-class paying jobs by the year 2030. What has been greatly discussed is the increasing number of middle-class paying work that is or will be absorbed by robots through artificial intelligence. In these cases, where artificial intelligent robots replace paid work, then individual incomes also die, and thus our gross domestic income is reduced to a deep depression level. He concludes, he goes, in such a situation, unless the 40% unemployed people are paid anyway without working, the USA will be in dire straits. And he believes that entrepreneurship may be the pathway to avoid this type of challenge. So we as educators, and I truly believe this, we have a huge responsibility of really educating this generation of students to either create their own jobs, create ventures, or at least navigate the uncertainty of our future. So that leads me to these 4 challenges I'm going to briefly go through. Number 1, defining entrepreneurship education, and maybe even more importantly, defining entrepreneurship teaching and learning. 3rd, how we're actually teaching entrepreneurship. And 4th, how we're actually developing a global cadre of faculty who need to teach entrepreneurship and in some cases are mandated to teach entrepreneurship but are not prepared to teach entrepreneurship. So I'm going to quickly go through these 4. And again, I don't have the answers. I'm just kind of posing the challenges and hoping that we can create a great conversation in our Q&A. So in terms of defining entrepreneurship education, you know, a quick search of the literature, because I've been doing a lot of research in this area, you know, there's lots of different definitions. But what's coming up time and time again are things around teaching skills, teaching talents, teaching mindsets, creating competent students in certain areas, building their attitudes towards entrepreneurship. And we could spend a lot of time on this slide, but you're going to be given copies of these slides, but this is just some of what's taking place. And during a strategic planning session last year with the ICSB board, I led us through an exercise so ICSB could kind of create a working definition for ourselves and the work that we're doing. And I just want to share this definition. And we believe that entrepreneurship education is the cultivation of knowledge, mindsets, skills, and competencies to enable learners, and note we're using learners and not just students because students sit in classrooms, but learners are more broad, to identify and act on opportunities, engage in ventures, and innovate throughout their lives. And if you note this last part of innovating throughout their lives, it means that entrepreneurship is a lifelong learning endeavor of constantly renewing our knowledge, mindsets, and skills and competencies. So this is our stake in the ground in terms of what we're thinking entrepreneurship education is. And if we sat here and defined entrepreneurship, we would have 55 or 54 different responses. And I know if we define entrepreneurship education, we have 55 different responses. So as an organization, when we're developing our strategy, this is what we're using based on our strategic planning. But then that begs the question of really how are we defining entrepreneurship teaching? And this is even more challenging. And you look at all the different things, and this is an exciting time, I think, around entrepreneurship education, where there's lots of different methodologies being put out there. But this doesn't necessarily define our teaching. If we look at the business model canvas, or design thinking, or lean startup methodology, what Steve Blank is doing and applying Eric Ries's methodology, if we look at even what Google is doing around their 5-day sprints, which is really an exercise in design thinking, if we look at even some of the stuff I'm doing around teaching entrepreneurship as a practice, Doan Winkle started the Entrepreneurship Exercises Journal where faculty can go and get exercises. And the bottom, we have stuff from Alex Bruton around the enographer, and the upper right, we have Bill Olette's work at MIT around discipline entrepreneurship. We have entrepreneurship students learning everything they know on YouTube. We have different games that are emerging, the founder, marketplace simulations, and the venture block simulation. And we have theories that are emerging that are dominating entrepreneurship, such as Sarah Spaffy's work on effectuation, which I'm a big fan on. So there's lots of different stuff out here. And one thing that's bothering me is that people are fighting about what's the one best way. You know, is lean startup the best way? And to me, there is no one best way. These are all tools for us to use because we're all teaching in different contexts. Some of us are at undergraduate, some of us are at MBA, some of us are doing vocational teaching, some of us are doing exec ed teaching. So I just want us all to embrace these different methods, and our responsibility as educators is to learn everything that's out there. And trust me, I know that what's being shown on the screen is not everything out there. And I think we have to educate ourselves on all the different possibilities around what we can use in the classroom. So when I say defining entrepreneurship teaching, to me that's around all the tools that we need to be aware of, but then we need to think about how we're teaching entrepreneurship, and that's a different issue. I've also been inspired by Ken Bain, and Ken Bain wrote the book, What the Best College Teachers Do. And he says that good teaching is about having students answer questions or solving problems that they find intriguing, interesting, or beautiful. When you think about that, answering questions or solving problems that they find intriguing, interesting, or beautiful. And I've really kind of fallen in love with this concept of the big questions. And let me just show you kind of what I'm doing. So recently I published a new textbook called Entrepreneurship, the Practice and Mindset. It just came out in January. For those of you that were at the ICSB conference, it was introduced there. And on the left-hand side, you see some of my chapter titles. Not all of them, but some of them. And these could be chapter titles, or these could also be topics in my syllabus. And what I've done is, with my students, I convert these topics or these chapter titles to provocative questions. So for example, in generating new ideas, the question for the day or for the module might be, how might we develop our creative self? Or for design thinking, how might we create solutions to meet the needs of customers? Or for testing, how might we design and run simple market tests evaluating promising opportunities? And you can kind of keep going down the different questions that are associated with the different content areas. My point here is that for each question, we may use a different tool. So let us not get bogged down in what's the best tool. Let us think more broadly about the intriguing questions or the problems that are interesting, intriguing, and beautiful, and what tool that may be best to teach students to help them navigate or answer that question. The last challenge I want to talk about is around faculty development. There is a paucity of areas right now where I think faculty can go and get trained on different areas around entrepreneurship education. For example, you know, Babson, where I am, and the program I run is the Babson Symposium for Entrepreneurship Educators, and we do this program twice a year, and the program is 4 days. Mike Morris runs a great program called the Experiential Classroom. Also, you know, you're there for 4 days. And then you have Lean Launchpad for Educators, and that's Steve Blank's approach, and you're there for 2.5 days. So these are very short-term things. And now ICSB, in conjunction with ICSB, is going to be offering a global certificate around social entrepreneurship education that we're trying to work out. But ICSB is also going to be offering badges and different kind of skill sets around different tools. So, for example, if you need a deep dive in the business model canvas, you come to ICSB and we'll have a platform to earn a badge around that. So we're seeing more activity, but this is a challenge, I think, around the globe. There's not enough training going on, because even in places like China, where they're mandating entrepreneurship education in higher ed, that's a great policy move in education. but that leaves a lot of faculty wondering, what do I do and how do I do it? So we need to come together as a community to figure out how can we best help our faculty develop the necessary skills, but more importantly, the confidence to teach entrepreneurship. Because I've been at this for a while, and many of you on the call have been at this for a while, but there's a lot of people who are like, oh no, I've been told to teach entrepreneurship, what do I do? And so we need to think about different pathways to help them. And I think through ICSB, through the affiliates, and even through ICSB's largest affiliate, ICSB, I think we're going to be helping a lot of people. So before I open it up for questions, I want to end with kind of a thought that has stuck with me. Well, let me back up. One of the things I do is I do a lot of reading, and I like to read outside of entrepreneurship. And I like to read things that are what I would say unusual, but then apply it to my teaching. And one of my latest readings is I read the autobiography of Steve Martin. And this is a picture of Steve Martin. And I read his autobiography not because of he's a comedian, but someone recommended that I read this autobiography with a lens on teaching. And in that book, he says, you know, it's really easy to have one great night up there on stage as a comedian, but it's so much more difficult to have a string of those nights. And I think we need to say that, think about that as educators. It's really easy to have that one awesome class, but it's far more difficult to have a semester of great sessions, whether you're online, face-to-face, in exec ed, in MBA, or undergrad. And we need places where we can come together to talk about entrepreneurship education, to talk about the scholarship of teaching and learning, and to build best practice together. But we have a lot of challenges, but it's also an exciting time because there's lots of new tools coming up every day, and we need to embrace those and share those. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to me for a few minutes, and I'd like to turn it over to questions. So, Ivan, I think you're leading the Q&A on this.
Yes. Heidi, thank you so much, and really high energy here. And you asked a lot of tough questions here. I wrote some, and I'm like, my God, that's difficult here. Heidi, I want to start with one question here that's kind of baffling me here, but I think it's also something that you might be picking up on as well here. Is we entrepreneurship education as a whole, we use a traditional model, which was going to schools or universities and colleges and sit in a classroom and take the courses. But now the atmosphere has changed, the sphere has changed, the industry has changed, and now we're in the midst of what we call an online revolution, education revolution here, or even universities are looking at ways to kind of innovate the way they educate online. And what's your thoughts on this? What do you see as the future of online education, and specifically when it comes to online entrepreneurship education?
Well, it's a really good point, and I don't necessarily think it's just online versus traditional. I think traditional is facing a lot of different pressures. I don't see in the short term of, you know, a lot of these face-to-face classes going away. I still think there will be a market for that. I don't think universities are going away. I think everyone's jumping in on this online bandwagon, and I think that's only going to continue to grow. And we have to figure out how to teach entrepreneurship in that virtual world, because entrepreneurship is so experiential. It has to be multidisciplinary. It has to be based on practice. And so how do we actually get students to do stuff in these virtual environments is a big challenge. But we're going to have to crack that nut. But, you know, the MOOC experiment has not panned out that well. You still have huge dropout rates, especially when you're just going to a MOOC for content, you can get content a lot faster online. So we have to figure out a way to engage students in these virtual environments. One of the metaphors I like to use when we're talking about content and entrepreneurship education is the content is available out there. Students don't need to come to us for content. We can get everything that we need on YouTube, online, lynda.com, Khan Academy, all the free MOOCs from Stanford, MIT, and even Babson. But see, the content's not important. students of entrepreneurship need that community where they can actually practice. So here's my metaphor. If I need the lyrics to a song, I can go on the internet and find any lyrics to any song, but that does not guarantee that I will be able to sing that song. So our role as educators is to help our students sing. So that's one thing. We need to figure out how to help them sing, whether it's online or in a traditional environment. The other pressure against the traditional university format is people that no longer care about the credential of the degree. People are more inclined just to collect skills these days, and that's in direct competition to the university. And so we need to think about how can we still offer students skills without necessarily giving them that degree, because the degree in this millennial generation is not that important. It still is internationally, but in the U.S., especially on the West Coast, I'm seeing the credential of a degree or the pedigree becoming less important. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Heidi, no, that's excellent. Heidi, I believe, at least this is my personal opinion, is we romanticize too much of entrepreneurship, right? And I feel that there's a dark side to entrepreneurship. And I think a lot of people are ignoring that a little bit, or entrepreneurship education, right? And they're ignoring that just because it's romantic, it's beautiful to look at entrepreneurship from that lens. But I was reading the news yesterday and the day before, and I'm reading about Uber, what they're doing. And I'm reading about other companies here. And I'm saying to myself, as an educator sitting in the classroom, I got a colleague that's teaching HR, and he sends me an email, and he goes, how would you address this? How would you address this from an entrepreneurship perspective with Uber or companies like this that are being entrepreneurial? Where's the line here? And it's an interesting question to have here. It's because we ask them to think outside the box, but it's also the time that there is the dark side. What's your reaction to this?
Gosh, now we're getting into the philosophy of ethics, right?
Yep. It's a forum, and I'll stop here and then we'll open it up.
Well, and this may be interesting to throw out to the forum. There's a dark side to everything. Give me one example where there's not a dark side to anything around entrepreneurship. You start a business, we know from creative disruption, it's going to shut down some other businesses. You automate jobs, it's taking jobs from one sector, and then you have to create another sector to helpfully build those jobs. I mean, there's a lot of dark sides, but that is economics. So specifically, tell me what you're talking about with Uber. I mean, I know there's a lot going on with Uber, but specifically tell me what you were reading.
One is that they actually have built in software that will pinpoint how to avoid city officials from being identified. Right? They are basically identified software that will find individuals saying, oh, please cancel the ride next to these people because they are city government officials. I thought that was ingenious that they did this, but it's also a little bit on the side of being unethical, where you're kind of sidestepping regulation. But Uber's model is these regulations are outdated, and we need to rethink them. So it's a very interesting conversation to have, but at the same time, it's something that I think a lot of educators will be interested to see how we approach it collectively together. I use it in my classroom. I think, is this unethical or is this business posturing? And where do you draw the line here?
Well, maybe the bigger issue is, do we have to have an answer, or is our job just to put the provocative question out there and not ignore some of these tough issues?
Exactly. All right, and I think we have a bunch of questions waiting here. Michael, do you want to open up the floor for questions for Heidi?
Sure. The first question is, Heidi, can you comment on the Google Ventures quick 5-day lean startup called Design Sprint? The person who asked the question teaches lean startup the Steve Blank way with the business model canvas, but he would like your opinion on the utility, purpose, and worth of the 5-day method.
I know this question is coming from Clint, so shout out to Clint out there. The 5 days, I think the 5-day sprint's a beautiful thing. This is yet another tool. that we can use. What I like about the 5-day sprint, it brings students through the design thinking process in a very immersive, fast-paced way, and it shows that something can produce in 5 days. Now, what they produce in that 5 days may be valuable, it may not, but it's exposing students to yet another process. If you take the traditional Steve Blank way with the lean startup methodology, you know, his semester is very much focused on the business model canvas, working through each box, testing hypotheses and changing. That's yet another tool. So it also, I think when you decide what tool to use or not to use, you have to think about your own learning objectives. But I like the sprint, but I also like Steve Blank's stuff. I like my own stuff. You know, they're all just different tools.
Clint actually had a second question, if we can share this one. What has China done to mandate entrepreneurship education, and what can we learn from it to use in U.S. schools?
You know, the limited knowledge I have on this based on my work in China is that the government says that every undergraduate has to be exposed to entrepreneurship education. They haven't necessarily defined, as far as I know, how that happens, but a lot of schools are scrambling to build courses and bring their students through this. I don't know if that's necessarily the right way, because you have to think about the implications of this. It's mandated, so that means everyone's going to be scrambling with probably little regard to quality, and you see a lot of businesses popping up to help students actually learn entrepreneurship. I'm not sure if it's something that the U.S. should follow, if that was the question, but time will tell.
Great. Next question. I wonder if you think that the impact assessment of entrepreneurship education is a challenge, and what are your thoughts on impact in general?
This is a great debate, probably should have been a challenge as well. I think some people think that the output of entrepreneurship education should be startups. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but that depends on where that education is taking place. So if you are assessing the impact of an accelerator or an incubator, I would certainly say the number of startups coming out and the longevity or success of those startups should definitely be a measure of impact. But if you were just looking at an entrepreneurship curriculum, let's just say I'll just use Babson College because this is where I am. If you're going to assess the impact of our concentration or our major in entrepreneurship on the number of startups coming out, I think that's an incorrect measure, because I don't think every person going through an entrepreneurship program in higher ed should be measured by a startup. They should be measured by their ability to think and act entrepreneurially in various contexts. Because I think as educators, we have a greater role, not just about starting up businesses, around teaching students to think and act entrepreneurially regardless of their chosen path. Now, if you look at our accelerator here, I certainly would say we want to see how many startups are in there and how many startups are successfully leaving.
Excellent. Next question. What advice would you give to doctoral students who are interested in the entrepreneurship faculty path? In this example, Pam is asking about obtaining a PhD in traditional marketing.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the beginning? Repeat that whole question, Michael. I'm sorry.
Sure, no problem. What advice would you give to doctoral students who are interested in the entrepreneurship faculty path? But in this case, she's interested in learning about obtaining a PhD in traditional marketing.
So if you're looking at obtaining a traditional PhD in marketing, I would encourage you to do all of your research at the intersection of marketing and entrepreneurship. Because when you go on the job market, you know, I see lots of people apply for jobs and they're coming out of strategy or marketing and they want to apply for an entrepreneurship faculty position, but none of their research and none of their teaching has been in that area. So you want to make sure that you're creating an identity or at this intersection of marketing and entrepreneurship, and that may be around customer development, that may be around analytics, marketing analytics and entrepreneurship, whatever your interest area is, but you need to create a clear path to entrepreneurship.
Thank you. Next question. I am an early stage academic who is highly engaged in my teaching and becoming a better entrepreneurship educator. As such, I enjoy researching and publishing in the area of entrepreneurship education and investigating new methods to engage learners. However, I feel that pedagogy publications are viewed as less prestigious than traditional entrepreneurship research. How do we overcome this obstacle to ensure that our careers are viewed as in this equally valid in higher education?
I think it's a brilliant question, and I can certainly empathize with that. I think the tides are turning a bit with respect to pedagogy or pedagogical research, especially in entrepreneurship education, because we're at a tipping point right now. There is lots of money being thrown at entrepreneurship. You know, people are funding accelerators, courses, concentrations, majors, centers, and now funders are stepping up saying, all right, if you want more money, you need to tell me what you're doing is working. So there's no evidence, or not enough evidence, of what we're doing is actually working, and that's where entrepreneurship education research comes in. Additionally, it's been great to see journals such as Academy of Management Learning and Education, and they're publishing some entrepreneurship education stuff. It's great to see the Journal of Management Education. Their impact index, their impact factor is increasing. And what you're going to hear about this year, and I'm so excited about this, is ICSB is coming out with Entrepreneurship Education and Pedagogy Journal, E, and P. It will be the sister journal of Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice that's currently published by Wiley, which is now going to be moving to Sage. So the first issue of E, and P, Entrepreneurship Education and Pedagogy, is coming out, and it will be coming out in conjunction with the ICSB Annual Conference in January. The editorial board is being put together, the first issue is being put together, and we have high hopes for that journal being rigorous and high quality. So I think you're seeing some things. In addition, ICSB's doctoral consortium is now moving to a doctoral consortium on the scholarship of teaching and learning entrepreneurship in the method of the Carnegie Foundation, which has a whole literature around the scholarship of teaching and learning. We're just applying that to entrepreneurship education. So as a young scholar in this area, I think you're in on the ground floor, and I would love to connect with you offline to kind of keep you informed on this. So please email me, whoever you are, at hneck@babson.edu, or link in with me.
Thank you, Heidi. The question was from Emma Fleck. So Emma, please email Heidi.
Yeah, Emma, I would love to converse with you offline.
Great. Another question was from an international attendee, and the question is about problems with students who are just concerned about getting their degree. He's having some problems motivating students into the entrepreneurial spirit. He's employing MIT's methodology by using role models and culture. The problem is till now, how do you get them to think of a good idea? Most students have a lot of classes and do not have the time to really think creatively and get the most out of their idea.
So this is a really big question, and this is kind of what I've struggled with my entire life, and why I love teaching so much is how do I actually engage students to get them inspired to take action. That's really about what entrepreneurship is for me. And I know this is going to sound like a shameless plug, but I really did write a textbook that came out in January that's built on action and getting students engaged. And with every chapter of that textbook, and let me also say that I haven't used the textbook in years. And I wrote this textbook for me because I haven't found a textbook that works to create action and practice in a classroom environment, and helping them generate new ideas, evaluate those ideas, testing those ideas, and getting them to move. So anyway, going back to, for each chapter, I give the teacher, the instructor, a very highly experiential exercises to use in the classroom in great detail. You don't even see that in the textbook. That's what you get if you adopt the textbook. It really is about modeling what we do in the classroom and what we want our students to engage in. So how do we get our students to practice different aspects of entrepreneurship, and how do we get them to experiment, to create, to empathize with entrepreneurs and customers, and to really make this a joyful experience. And it goes back to those provocative questions too. So again, you don't have to adopt it, but as an educator, you have free access to this textbook. So find it through Sage or send me an email and I'll give you a link of how you can get a free copy of the textbook and take a look at that because it may give you some ideas.
Awesome. One more question we had from Breda Kenny. She wanted to know if you could give some more information about digital badges in entrepreneurship education. Where can she find some more information on this?
Yeah, so Doan Winkle is our president, I'm not president-elect, he's our senior vice president-elect of programming for ICSB. And he is working on creating a platform for ICSB where our members can come and earn badges around different teaching tools and topics. And we're in the process of putting that together. But if you'd like more information, email Doan Winkle, and you can find him on LinkedIn, on the ICSB website, or if you can't find him, just email me, and I will send you to him.
Great. We also know Doan very well, so Breda, we can help with that as well.
Great.
Another question: the field of entrepreneurship is full of paradoxes, but the field of entrepreneurship education, compared with education and other disciplines, also has more than its fair share of paradoxes. He wanted to know if you can list some. For example, we teach entrepreneurship to our students, so our students don't make the same mistakes their non-pedigree mentors. However, we promote entrepreneurial learning, experiential learning. He likes your concern about skills versus pedigree.
So, the paradoxes. I think one paradox that comes up for me over and over again is, Heidi, you encourage us to take action, to experiment, to be creative, to be agile, to be flexible, to try new things, to not worry about failing, because every time you fail, you're learning something that someone else doesn't know, and you need to build that learning into the next iteration. However, you're grading us. You know, so we don't want to fail. So it's this contradiction between the traditional archaic way that we grade and have to assess students for a degree versus what we're trying to inculcate into them in the classroom and outside the classroom. So I see that as a paradox. I see a paradox being, look at all these great entrepreneurs who dropped out of college, yet you're saying I need to finish college. And my response there is, you're talking about maybe 10 entrepreneurs that have made billions and they dropped out of college, but look at the millions and millions and millions of entrepreneurs out there that are failing every day. And how can we use entrepreneurship education to mitigate that failure? Another paradox is around economic value, and that entrepreneurship is about building wealth and jobs. But we're also talking about building social value, and how can you do both? And my response to that is, if we don't do both, we're in dire straits. There's no reason why we can't generate economic and social value at the same time. There's no reason that we have to wait to give back to society. We need to be doing both at the same time. So those are three paradoxes that are coming up, you know, in the top of mind. So a very difficult question.
You know, Heidi, after these three paradoxes, I'm going to drink now. I'm not going to start drinking. You know, these are really tough. These are tough, but it's also, you know, these are the opportunities out there that you can see that can potentially happen here. You're in a leadership position at ICSB now, and you talked briefly and kind of fast about where ICSB is moving towards here. But I want to talk a little bit about it, because it's a lot of hard work that you put together. And this is an opportunity not just to your ICSB members, but we have a world audience here, a global audience here. So talk a little bit what's happening in California, the upcoming conference in California, what's being planned, and talk about maybe the doctoral consortium that you're putting together. And so people start planning from now, you know, and saying, okay, this is something exciting that's happening in ICSB. Let's look at it for January as well.
Yeah, we are so excited. I mean, I've never, you know, when I agreed to run for president, when I got elected president, I had no idea how much work this was going to be. And I am just giddy. I am so, every day I'm excited about doing ICSB work because I love the changes that are taking place. We are really we are no longer, and I know this is going to be probably a negative thing to say on a webinar with a global group of people, but USASB has always been third rate. We've always been competing with the Academy of Management or with the Babson Research Conference, and then there was USASB, the place to go when your paper didn't get into the Academy or to the Babson Research Conference. I don't want USASB to compete with the Academy of Management or the Babson Research Conference. I want USASB to be the only organization that does what it does right now. And this is an organization that embraces at all levels entrepreneurship education from a teaching perspective and also from a research perspective. And if you want to bring your mainstream research to the USASB conference, you can, but you're going to be forced to say, teach it to us. How can we take what you've researched and use that in the classroom? How is this moving our practice of teaching entrepreneurship forward? So when we go to Hollywood in January, the theme is lights, camera, entrepreneurship. And we are having, we are separating sessions based on teaching entrepreneurship, based on researching entrepreneurship education and converting and translating our mainstream research into teachable content. And the third part of our conference is on the co-curricular aspect of entrepreneurship education. What's going on outside the classroom? What's working there? What's not working there? So all three of these broad tracks, teaching, researching entrepreneurship education, and the programming aspect of entrepreneurship education are coming together into a tightly woven package that is going to benefit all stakeholders that have a place in this world that we call entrepreneurship education. And so I'm super excited. Our message is going to be tight, the communication is going to be clear, and the community that's coming to Hollywood and that's going to be our membership moving forward is going to be powerful.
Heidi, you mentioned all of this, and the slide that I'm looking at right in front of me here is of Steve Martin. So you can see the connections here. But I think you're firing up the USASB members, you're firing up all the ICSB members. This is really exciting here. Michael, you want to talk a little bit about our upcoming conference in Argentina and what we're doing, and then I'll talk about the next month's webinar.
Sure. The ICSB will be hosting its 62nd annual conference in Buenos Aires, Argentina. It'll be at the end of June, June 28th to July 1st, 2017. We encourage you to visit the website, www.icsb2017.org. There's a lot of information on there, including keynote speakers, online submission, the venue, accommodations, tourism opportunities, and registration. For the accommodations, we have 7 different hotel properties which we negotiated special rates with, anything from around $170 a night to under $100 a night. So we encourage you to look at the website, look at the different options, and also to consider submitting a paper. The online submission deadline was extended until the end of March, so we encourage you to visit our online submission system. We have a submission system for English submissions and a separate one for Spanish and Portuguese. So we encourage you to submit competitive papers, competitive workshops, teaching cases, or experiences before March 31st. We're also excited that the conference this year on June 27th will represent the inaugural launch of the MSMEs Day. Maybe Ayman wants to talk more about the MSMEs Day, but we really encourage you all to consider submitting your papers, consider attending the conference, and also some tourism opportunities after and into the July 4th weekend where maybe you have a few extra days to spend. Ayman?
Thank you, Michael. And just to follow up, the MSMEs Days is a day that we currently are working with the United Nations, in which the United Nations will declare on June 27th, in collaboration with ICSB, a day dedicated solely to micro, small, medium enterprises worldwide. Of course, all these type of businesses start with entrepreneurs. Those are the ones that are creating these new businesses worldwide. So we're going to be celebrating this with the United Nations on June 27th. And we're very excited, and more information will be forthcoming as we roll out a whole campaign explaining what's happening to ICSB and all its affiliates, including USASB and everyone else. So we're super excited at this. And Heidi, you lit a fire here with this ICSB webinar series. You really are changing the way we look at entrepreneurship education here. We've met 17 years ago. This is when we both were doctoral students here. We had no idea what even a webinar series is. Did you ever even know what a webinar series 17 years ago was?
Well, that's depressing. That's really depressing. You're right. No.
You know,
the internet was barely born.
And here we are, kind of looking at the world from a whole new lens, but there's a whole new generation coming right behind us, and they're going to just revolutionize the whole way we look at things here. And Heidi, I want to thank you for your start today. This is really exciting. We're super thrilled you're having here. And I want to also tell you that the next speaker is a giant in the field, and he is as fired as you are. I asked him for the title for his next webinar series, and the speaker is Dr. Frank Hoy. And the title that he gave me,
I love Frank.
You know the title he gave me for the next webinar series, and you're going to like this. Why are we ignoring family businesses? That's the title of his webinar series. And he goes, and this is what he said to me, Ayman, do you think that question is an exaggeration? Family businesses outnumber non-family businesses in most national economies. How much attention do they really get in business education? How many universities offer programs or even courses in family business? I want to talk about that, and I want everybody to come to listen to me on it. Frank Hoy is fired up, right? So we want to welcome everybody that attended today to join our next webinar series. And Michael, the date on the next one is?
April 12th.
Great, and it's going to be on April 12th. And Heidi, I'm going to leave you the floor for just the last message to everybody, and then we'll close it. The floor is yours, Heidi, and I want to thank you again so much.
I just want to thank everyone for sharing their questions and spending an hour with us online hanging out. And I am excited about the future of entrepreneurship education, and I want more people studying it. I want more people engaged in it, and I want more tools out there. So let's just, onward, keep pushing forward, because, again, we really do have a huge responsibility.
And Heidi, on behalf of ICSB and ICSB affiliates worldwide, and we want to thank you for your time and all the preparation you put into it. I know it wasn't just a half an hour when I asked you for it. You put a lot of hours here, and I want to thank you for your dedication and professionalism on this. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.